Module 5, TBRI, Empowering Principles, Physiological Strategies. In this section of TBRI, you will get an introduction to empowering principles, physiological strategies, and sensory processing challenges and sensory preferences. The empowering principle focus on supporting the body's physical well-being and creating an environment that supports regulation. In general, people cannot learn or build new skills when basic physical needs like hydration and sleep are not met. The empowering principles are also specifically designed to meet the needs of children whose brains, biology, and bodies have been impacted by toxic stress. If you think back to an idea of expected development, you'll see how the empowering principles are designed to offer repetitive experiences that guide children toward an optimal development trajectory. The empowering principles include two sets of strategies: physiological strategies, which focus on meeting the internal and physical needs of children to support optimal functioning of the brain and body and to support regulation. These include things like hydration, blood sugar, sleep, movement, and other sensory needs. Then there's ecological strategies, which focus on the external environment and guide children towards learning self-regulation skills. These strategies include things like routines, managing transitions, and scaffolding, guided support that facilitates learning new skills. These sessions will focus on the physiological strategies. In Module 1, felt safety was described as when your brain, body, and inner self feel safe, truly safe, within your whole being, physically, cognitively, and emotionally, within the environment, and within your relationships. To reiterate, felt safety is not something a caregiver can decide for a child or anyone else. It is different from a practical or logical definition of safety, such as feeling safe because the door is locked. This type of safety is more internal. It relates to what we know about attachment and the role of caregivers as a secure base. Humans are biologically wired for connection and rely on others to have their needs met. Felt safety involves a strong internal sense of security and trust in the presence of another person. They will help me get my needs met. They will protect me and help me work through things that feel scary or overwhelming. I know who is in charge, and I trust that they know what to do. I can relax because I know that I will be cared for. Toxic stress often arises from experiences that disrupt a person's internal sense of safety. Even when the situation is not life-threatening, it can lead the individual to question their well-being and whether they are truly safe. As we've learned, children who have experienced toxic stress have an overactive downstairs brain. It doesn't take much for them to flip their lids. Oftentimes, this is because they are hypervigilant. Their brain and body are constantly on alert, looking for any sign of danger and ready to react quickly to anything their brain perceives as dangerous. Again, this doesn't have to be something objectively dangerous. Anything out of the ordinary or anything that reminds the child's brain or body of a negative experience can be perceived as dangerous to a brain that has experienced toxic stress. a door slamming, a strong smell, a fear of ongoing hungry, a raised voice, or a big emotion can all lead to a flipped lid in a hypervigilant downstairs brain. Safety is a central focus of this session because the empowering principles are designed to create both internal and external conditions that promote it through consistency, predictability, and support for regulation. This allows children's brains and bodies to be given the opportunity to shift from hypervigilant, alert state into a state of calmness, playfulness, and regulation. Repeated experiences of moving from alert to calm help rewire the brain to handle challenges and emotions without consistently flipping the lid, and to recover more quickly when the lid is flipped. It is important to recognize that no child or adult can remain in a state of calm at all times. There will be times when everyone's lids get flipped. The goal is not to eliminate these moments entirely, but to help children become more resilient, meaning they can handle some stress or emotion without becoming overwhelmed. And if they do flip their lid, they know how to return back to a calm state. This is an essential life skill and social skill. We want the children in our care to be able to navigate challenges. This is why teaching self-regulation is also part of the empowering principles. As with all TBRI-related approaches, connection is a central component in implementing the strategies of the empowering principles. Some strategies may appear primarily as instrumental care. While these strategies serve practical purposes, they can also be delivered in ways that provide nurturing care. For example, one physiological strategy is to increase hydration. If a caregiver simply places a cup of water in front of a child and leaves, the physical need is met, which is beneficial. However, if the caregiver uses this moment to engage with the child through warm eye contact and gentle touch, they address the physical need while also fostering connection through nurturing care. Before exploring the physiological strategies, it is important to note that the empowering principles provide numerous opportunities to encourage giving notice, giving yeses, and sharing power. For example, to increase hydration, a caregiver might ask, would you prefer your water in a red cup or a blue cup today? To promote physical activity and play, a caregiver can accept a child's invitation to play a game outside. When providing a transition warning, if a child requests an additional 2 minutes, the caregiver can share power by negotiating a compromise when and if it's appropriate. Physiological strategies. The TBRI physiological strategies are about empowering the wisdom of our bodies. The word physiological is a combination of the words physical and biological, and refers to the different ways our body works to keep us functioning. Our physiology includes things like heart rate, breathing, and how food is used for energy. This is sometimes referred to as the wisdom of the body, because in optimal circumstances, the body naturally knows how to take care of itself. There are things happening within our bodies all day, every day, to help us function. The body instinctively responds to its needs. For example, increasing breathing rate during physical activity or signaling hunger and fatigue when food or rest is needed. These are natural processes that help maintain well-being. However, recognizing, interpreting, and responding to these signals is a skill that many individuals must relearn for various reasons, including experiences of toxic stress or trauma. People may become disconnected from the inherent wisdom of their bodies. The physiological strategies can help us focus on empowering and respecting our own bodies and the bodies of the children in our care. They concentrate on empowering children internally through things like hydration, keeping blood sugar at an appropriate level, and understanding how children may be processing sensory input. When the body is operating at an optimal level, it's easy to take for granted. However, when something goes wrong, it can manifest in ways that may seem completely unrelated, like a tantrum or withdrawal from others. Low blood sugar, sensory overwhelm, and dehydration, together or separately, can often show themselves through behavior. Adults may be grumpy, but children may have a meltdown, an outburst, shut down, or become aggressive if their physiological needs aren't met. Consider the 5 B's and the effects of toxic stress on the body and human biology. Toxic stress can increase vulnerability and dysregulation when internal or physiological needs are unmet. For individuals functioning primarily from their downstairs brain, unmet physical needs can more easily activate the stress response system, leading to rapid emotional escalation. While meeting physical needs is important for everyone, it is especially essential for caregivers to monitor and respond to these needs in individuals who have experienced early toxic stress. The physiological strategies are organized into 2 main categories: meeting physical needs and meeting sensory needs. Physical needs include hydration, blood sugar, nutrition, and sleep. Hydration, blood sugar, nutrition, and sleep each support many functions in the body, such as thinking and learning, mood, concentration, and memory. When we are working toward creating optimal environments for the children in our care, we have to think about their brains and their bodies in the context of the larger environment. As we practice mindful awareness, it's important to think about our own bodies and brains and how we can establish healthy routines for ourselves and for the children in our care. When we have our own physical needs met, we can provide better care. Think of a time that your mood or behavior was affected by being hungry, thirsty, or tired. What happened? While oftentimes things like hunger or thirst may not be obvious because of dysregulation, they have a profound impact on how we as humans function. For individuals with overactive stress response, unmet physical needs can more easily lead to dysregulation. Food and water, or the lack thereof, in some cases, can be particularly triggering for children with a history of food insecurity. Sensory difficulties with certain foods are stressful food-related experiences. As we will learn when we talk about sensory needs, the sensory experience that comes with food, or even just meal times in general, can be an emotional trigger as well as a physical one. For example, if a child was consistently in trouble at dinner time for not sitting still at the table, they may come to associate eating with negative emotions. Alternatively, food can have a positive association, like the happy or content feeling that comes with smelling your favorite meal cooking. If a child is consistently flipping their lid or has confusing behaviors when it comes to the food-related experiences, consider the why behind those behaviors with compassion and curiosity. Our responses, behaviors, and perceptions tell the story of what we may have experienced. This is just as true for children as it is for the caregiver. While some behaviors have a deeper why that needs to be addressed, many caregivers find that simply increasing water intake and providing more regular snacks positively impact a child's ability to regulate. Hydration. By the time an individual experiences thirst, they may have already lost some of their body weight and experienced a decline in cognitive functioning. Even at low levels, dehydration causes changes in thinking, behavior, and mood. Studies show not having enough water leads to difficulty concentrating, trouble with memory, anxiety, anger, and irritability. In a study published in 2015, over half of children ages 6 to 10 in the USA were considered dehydrated. Dehydration influences general health. Stress hormones like cortisol increase, metabolism slows down, we don't sleep as well, and toxins aren't flushed out of our bodies as efficiently. So it's important to note that thirst is not the most reliable indicator of hydration. By the time you feel thirsty, brain and body functions may have already been compromised. Being proactive about increasing water intake and incorporating it into a routine is important. If you or the children in your care only drink water when thirsty, cognition and behavior are probably already being impacted. Blood sugar and nutrition. Just like with hydration, even minor fluctuations in your blood sugar can lead to dysregulated behavior and cause alterations in thinking and learning. The brain utilizes about 60% of the body's sugar, so it is no wonder the brain suffers when the body is hungry. When the brain does not receive proper nutrients, the blood sugar takes a dip because children are hungry. They become dysregulated. All of the following can be associated with being hungry and or low blood sugar levels: cognitive and academic deficits, difficulty concentrating or listening, anxiety, depression, irritability, aggression, withdrawal, lack of motivation, or lethargy. Hunger and blood glucose can impact behavior for a variety of reasons. Self-regulation requires energy. So when blood glucose is low, our energy is low, and therefore our capacity to regulate big emotions is diminished. Additionally, the body releases cortisol, the stress hormone, when we're hungry. As we know, activation of the stress response system impacts behavior. Caregivers can support regulation by helping to stabilize blood glucose levels in children and in themselves. If it seems overwhelming to incorporate increased water intake and more regular snacks in your daily routine, start by offering water and a snack to children when they are dysregulated. If the caregivers are operating from the willful disobedience mindset, it can be easy to look at this as rewarding bad behavior. However, if a caregiver has shifted to the survival strategies mindset, they can recognize that water and a snack might be exactly what the child needs to help them regulate. Behavioral outbursts take a lot of energy. If we want to help a child regulate, we can help their brain and body by providing water and a snack. Sleep is another physiological need that is required for optimal functioning. Sleep impacts various systems in the body, including the circulatory, respiratory, and immune systems. Inadequate sleep is linked to a variety of behavioral and health outcomes, such as cognition, motivation, and overall physical health. Anyone tired knows it is difficult to learn, and it diminishes your capacity to regulate emotion. Ensuring adequate sleep can be difficult because it's not something we can control for someone else. But as caregivers, we can create an environment that supports healthy sleep habits and optimal sleep. Some strategies to do this include having a bedtime routine that happens around the same time each day. A routine helps children know what's coming next and lets their brain and body know that it is time, to start winding down. Talking to the child about what they might need to feel safe and comfortable. For an example, a nightlight, a stuffed animal, a closed door, or maybe an open door. Ensuring other physical and sensory needs have been met before bedtime, such as hydration, blood sugar, or calming sensory activities.
This stuff is really good.
It may sound mundane, but begin by meeting your child's basic needs. Schedule regular snacks into the day. Make sure your child has plenty to drink and enough sleep.
Getting all tucked in.
They need more sleep than many kids. They need more attention to their diet than many kids. They need more attention to what they drink and how often.
There you go.
We know those children are often dehydrated chronically. And dehydration actually drives failure in behavior and failure in cognition.
So does malnutrition. Children who don't get enough of the right foods can experience dramatic swings in blood sugar levels. A balanced diet of protein and complex carbohydrates keeps levels steady, stabilizing mood swings and eliminating one of the most common triggers for a behavioral outburst.
At the start of this session, we talked about how the empowering principles relate to felt safety, connection, and giving voice, and shared power. As you've probably already noticed about TBRI, the concepts, principles, and strategies are all interconnected. This is the nature of a holistic developmental intervention. So, the empowering principles also relate to regulation. As we learned, self-regulation develops through attachment. Remember, in optimal circumstances, an infant's brain is taken through repetition of need expressed, need met, dysregulation to regulation, alert to calm. Sensory processing helps explain how that repetition over time increases a child's capacity to regulate and move through the process of other regulation, to co-regulation, to self-regulation. This information about sensory processing helps us understand how caregivers help scaffold regulation from a practical standpoint. Sensory processing and regulation are not synonymous, but they are interrelated. All humans rely on senses to understand the world. When caregivers hold, coo at, or rock fussy infants, they help prepare the child's brain and bodies for self-regulation. When caregivers hold babies close to comfort them, they provide nurturing touch, gentle pressure, and slow movement to calm them. Caregivers may also sing in a melodic tone, stimulating the auditory system, while at the same time making eye contact and stimulating the visual system. Caregivers' use of soothing strategies engages the infant's senses. This sensory bath regulates infants and, when experienced over time, supplies them with valuable knowledge about the world around them. When toddlers crawl, try new foods, or bump into things, their brains interpret feedback from the senses. They learn, for example, that apples are crunchy, but cheese is soft. In other words, their brains are taking in what they taste, see, smell, touch, and hear, and using this to identify patterns that will help them in the future. Sensory processing helps children learn about the world they live in, develop and use language, regulate their brains, bodies, and emotions, and even develop healthy relationships with others. Infants are completely dependent on others for most of their needs, including most of their sensory needs, meaning that without a caregiver, an infant is unable to regulate physical needs like hunger and body temperature, emotional needs like comfort or being startled, or sensory needs like movement and visual stimulation. Through consistent and attentive care, in time, external regulation becomes a shared responsibility of co-regulation. The developing child begins to ask for help, meeting needs. For example, I'm hungry. Finally, co-regulation sets the stage for regulation, in which the child understands their need and is capable of meeting that need. For example, getting their sweater when they are cold. Remembering that the brain and the body's ability to regulate only develops through mentoring can help caregivers understand that it's their job to help the child regulate. If a child does not know how to regulate themselves, it's because they were never taught. Caregivers should also be mindful of unrealistic expectations for what children should be able to do without help. A child's capacity for regulation in any given moment depends on their developmental age, their history of co-regulation, and their current circumstance. If a child is hungry, they will find it more difficult to regulate themselves without help. Processing sensory input involves 3 steps. Sensory input is received. The input is interpreted or given meaning. And the brain and body respond based on interpretation. The brain and body go through these steps constantly without usually you noticing. In this process, the sensory input itself is objective or neutral. It is our brain's interpretation of the sensation that gives it meaning. For example, smoke around a campfire may seem harmless, while unexpected smoke in a kitchen can signal danger. Then, based on your brain's interpretation, you'll respond to the sensory input differently. If you smell smoke in your kitchen, your brain might tell you to respond by taking action immediately, whereas the smoke from the campfire may signal your body to relax because you have positive memories associated with sitting around a campfire. In this interpretation step of sensory processing, the brain is also integrating information from all of the other senses to create cohesive and coherent understanding of the situation. To stick with the smoke example and the campfire scenario, your brain is integrating the smell of smoke with the sight of the controlled and contained fire, the soft sound of the crackling fire, and lack of alarming sounds, and maybe even the taste of s'mores. When your brain puts all of these pieces together, it determines that you're safe. Again, this process is happening very quickly and automatically. The senses also help the brain to select what is most important in the environment and what to respond to. Our senses are usually taking in a lot of sensory information at once. Think about the current environment. You can likely hear, smell, feel, see, and maybe even taste a variety of different things. Right now, your brain is hopefully telling you to focus on this training. But if you suddenly heard a door slam, your brain would likely shift to focus based on that new sensory information. This is because sensory input aids in focusing attention. Our brain's interpretation of sensory input is largely based on our history of sensory experiences and the emotions that accompany those experiences. For example, the smell of familiar food that our favorite aunt used to make might be interpreted as calming, happy, and safe because you have a positive memory associated. Conversely, if a family experienced flooding during a storm, the sound of thunder and the sight of lightning may be perceived as threatening and activate the stress response system: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Additionally, if a sensation is unfamiliar, your brain may have trouble integrating the experience. This is why some children who have experienced extreme neglect as infants often have sensory processing challenges. The lack of sensory input and experiences in early childhood impacts the brain's ability to interpret and integrate sensory input coherently. Without a variety of sensory experiences in early childhood, that part of the brain becomes underdeveloped and easily overwhelmed. It doesn't have the wiring or practice to quickly sort through a large amount of sensory input at once. Every individual will have their own sensory preferences and will therefore be able to tolerate different levels of different types of sensory input. Some people like the TV turned up loud. Others like the TV at a softer volume. Neither person is right nor wrong. They just have a different preference when it comes to sensory input. Let's discuss. How might children indicate that they are receiving too much sensory input from sight, sound, touch, tactile, taste, and smell? Consider how noticing these signs can help caregivers respond early and better to understand a child's sensory preferences. Some examples are listed, but feel free to add culturally relevant or sector-specific examples as well. I'll just call out a few. Sight. They may look away, turn their head, scrunch or close their eyes, or cover their eyes with their hands. A sound. They may rush to cover their ears, talk to themselves, or self-soothe with their own voice. Touch, tactile. They may refuse to touch an object or items, keep their hands in their pockets, or even cross their arms. Taste. They may refuse to eat certain foods or textures, insist that they are finished eating, insist that they don't like certain foods. And last, smell. Somatic or physical systems like the stomach or headache. They may become irritable, cranky around certain strong smells. Those are just some examples of each sensory input. Before we learn more about sensory experiences and sensory preferences, let's define the different senses. Most of us are familiar with the external senses such as sound, touch, sight, smell, taste. We call these external senses because the brain and body are processing input that is coming from outside of the body. We also have three internal senses: vestibular, proprioception, and interoception. These are called internal senses because the brain and body are processing input that is coming from inside the body. The vestibular sense, controlled by the fluid in the inner ear, helps the body maintain balance and understand its position in relation to the ground. When the sense is disrupted, such as during vertigo or dizziness, we are essentially stuck. and unable to do anything until the dizziness goes away. This highlights the importance of the vestibular sense in our daily activities. The vestibular system begins developing in utero and impacts all other sensory systems. In newborns, the vestibular system is fairly well developed, but not completely. As we age, the fluid in our inner ear thickens, resulting in us feeling our movements more profoundly. Sensory input from the vestibular sense can be alerting or calming. This means that depending on the type of movement, the vestibular system can either contribute to upregulation or downregulation. Knowing the basics of alerting and calming sensations can help caregivers be proactive in addressing dysregulation related to sensory input. The proprioceptive sense registers the amount of pressure we are experiencing when the body is being touched or when we are touching something or someone. Proprioception is what tells us that a hug feels too tight, that we are being gentle when we pet an animal, that we're pressing the pencil to paper too hard or not hard enough. Like the vestibular sense, it helps us understand where our body is in relation to our environment. It is the sense that is grounding or tethering us to our environment. Proprioception is considered the calming sense and can also be referred to as deep muscle input. Any activity that requires the use of muscle engages the proprioceptive sense. Example: chewing, jumping, push-ups, carrying something heavy. This sense is also activated when your body receives pressure from outside sources, even if you're not actively moving, such as a firm hug or a weighted blanket. You'll notice many self-soothing behaviors include proprioception, such as thumb sucking, clenching of the jaw, and applying pressure to our brow. Interoception is an awareness of the inner state of the body. This includes physical sensations like hunger, stomach aches, or a fast heartbeat. But it also includes more subtle intuitive sensations like what people mean when they say trust your instincts or gut and listen to your body. This is the sense that is perceiving sensations from inside the body. These internal sensations, along with the current thoughts, memories, and input from other senses, create a picture of how an individual is feeling in any given moment. When someone can accurately make sense of their internal sensations, they can more clearly understand what they need or want in the current moment. Interoception is related to many aspects of functioning because it is how we see the need in ourselves, and it is closely linked with the stress response system. Because of this, interoceptive awareness is foundational for regulation. Our body creates a sensation. Our brain assigns meaning to this sensation based on other current information and cultural and familial patterns, and our own beliefs and past experiences, which ultimately result in a response. Research shows that people with greater awareness of their internal sensations can recover from stress more quickly than people with less awareness. When someone is more attuned to the sensations of their body, they can recognize possible stress or deregulation more quickly and then use regulation strategies to help them avoid flipping their lid. People with less stress awareness might ignore or not be able to perceive the early signs of dysregulation in the body. And then, when they flip their lid, it takes them by surprise. That level of dysregulation is harder to recover from, and it takes longer to return to a state of calm. In TBRI, we call this catching it low. Because if caregivers can be attuned to early signs of dysregulation in a child, they can help that child regulate before their lids are flipped. It is easy to see why many people who have experienced trauma or toxic stress may struggle with interoceptive awareness. For some people, tuning out their body and their internal sensations was a survival strategy. Think about what we've learned about toxic stress, the stress response system, and disorganized attachment. If a child was experiencing toxic stress, their body was likely on constant alert and sending internal signals to try to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. But if a child could not escape the situation, learning to turn off or ignore those internal signals become a survival strategy. People can learn to override or dismiss more physical internal sensations. For example, if a child experiences chronic food insecurity, they might learn to tune out early hunger cues. Or if someone experiences chronic pain, they might learn to disconnect from their bodily sensations to cope with the constant discomfort. Interpretation of internal signals is also impacted by caregiving relationships and the environment. For example, if a child feels internal sensations that accompany the feeling of being sad, and their caregiver says, "You're fine, there's nothing to cry about," over time, that child will learn to misinterpret or override those sensations of sadness. Even though the caregiver might be trying to help the child calm down, that kind of dismissive response is subtly teaching the child that their interpretation of their internal sensations is incorrect. Thankfully, interoceptive awareness is something that we can intentionally cultivate or grow through any practice that helps us tune into our body. What kinds of movement help your body feel calm or focused? How does your body let you know when something doesn't feel right? Like when you're too hot, thirsty, or need a break. What do you do in those moments? Take a few minutes to think about that. As mentioned earlier, a key part of sensory processing includes the interpretation and integration of sensory input from all of the senses. And the interpretation is often based on previous sensory experiences. The phrase sensory processing challenges can refer to a variety of challenges such as being easily overwhelmed by certain sensations, not noticing or reacting to certain sensations, having trouble integrating the different sensations and therefore becoming easily overwhelmed or confused by sensations, and or lacking coordination. Oftentimes, a child's response to these type of challenges can manifest in their behavior. Children who are hypersensitive or are having trouble integrating sensations might become dysregulated very easily, which can cause them to act out or shut down. Children who have hyposensitivity might have trouble sitting still, for example, which can be perceived as disrespectful or disruptive in many settings. Everyone has a sensory preference, but when sensory challenges are impacting someone's daily life or quality of life, caregivers can learn to help children meet their unique sensory needs and or work with an occupational therapist. We all have sensory preferences, meaning there are certain sensations we seek, ones we avoid, and ones that we feel neutral about. If our sensory system is well developed, we are able to successfully navigate discomfort in our sensory experience relatively quickly and often without thinking about it. We use the tools that we have learned from our caregivers, our teachers, our peers to self-regulate when we are over or understimulated. If our sensory system has not been developed fully or optimally, we likely have to work harder to regulate when we are over or understimulated. We may find ourselves or the children in our care becoming dysregulated more easily and having stronger interactions and behavioral responses when we are dysregulated. We will likely need to teach ourselves effective ways to manage dysregulation related to sensory preferences and rely on tools to help us navigate uncomfortable sensory situations. In addition, it may take longer for us to return to a state of regulation. Here's a list of some common behaviors you might see if a child is generally sensory avoidant or sensory seeking. Sensory avoidant examples: they avoid eating certain foods, getting their hands dirty, dislike loud noises or cover their ears, avoid wearing certain clothing with certain types of tags, wipes off kisses, dislike bright lights, and cover their eyes often. Sensory seeking examples: maybe they frequently spin, jump, swing, frequently want firm hugs, bite or suck on their fingers, seek to be tossed in the air or being off the ground, seeks wrestling, tickling, and physical play, frequently fidgets or has trouble sitting still. Supporting sensory needs is part of the physiological strategies of empowering principles because, as we've just learned, sensory experiences impact a child's ability to regulate. Understanding the sensory system helps caregivers become more proactive in addressing the sensory needs of children in their care and helps caregivers understand possible underlying needs behind a child's behavior. While our responses to sensory overwhelm may sometimes be directly connected to the experience, there are many times when we have behaviors that are seemingly disconnected from overstimulation. This can happen more often for children and adults who have had stressful experiences, who have not learned self-regulation tools, and or those who are having a hard time understanding what is happening in their brain and body. These behaviors can often look like defiance or manipulation when in fact they are attempts to avoid sensory overload or seek the sensory input needed to regulate. By learning more about sensory processing, you can see how sometimes people's behaviors may be related to sensory needs that they cannot articulate. The TBRI empowering principles are designed to give repetition of experiences that help support children's physical well-being. To meet sensory needs, caregivers need tools to help children regulate and to teach them self-regulation. Remember that with TBRI principles and strategies, caregivers should keep connection in mind. We learn to regulate through relationships. So simply giving a child a list of common strategies to try will not be as effective as teaching the child regulation strategies through connection and play.
The pieces you can put together, depending on your space, your budget, can be very, very creative. For example, we turned a slide off the playground backwards.
1, 2, 3, jump! Woo-hoo!
And the children, instead of climbing up the steps, they had to pull themselves up the side of the slide. They stood at the top and they crashed.
Woo! Good work! Good work! Good work!
So the children get deep muscle input, proprioception. They get to the top of the ladder. And if we can, if we've got their attention, we'll say, let's go 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3, jump!
Now they're learning to be in a detachment dance with a child. At the same time, they have to regulate for 3 seconds because they don't just get up there and jump. So they're having to regulate their thinking. So that the buddy might go 1, 2, 3, jump.
1, 2, 3, jump! Woo!
And then they jump into ball pool, sofa, mattress, whatever piece of equipment you have accessible. And when they do that, I mean, here you see crash down bone.
On your elbows and crawl up.
What we would look to put together is a series of
Roll on
components.
your tummy. Crawl, crawl, crawl. Woo! You're going fast. Good job.
We might have a little belly slide where they can, do the proprioception of dragging themselves on the little belly board.
Very nice, weaving around.
It is sensory rich, attachment rich. We might have a little slide or a little, turn toy that they can get on. And then we'll typically have the children come through a tunnel of some kind. So they're getting, again, proprioceptive and or tactile. For some families, they can buy the little $30 plastic tunnels and lay them out. Some will buy a large piece of sock material, like the large tubing, from a fabric store, and just keep the tubing all sewed up, and the children crawl through that, and as they do, you get this wonderful tactile and some proprioceptive activity for the child.
Ready?
And the last piece for us is a little small trampoline, and the child will jump about 10 times.
8, 9, 10.
Now they could jump 20 times, but if you get a child jumping 60 times, you better look for a behavioral meltdown, because remember, a lot of vestibular is going to activate. While the other 2 senses, that input lasts 2 hours, the vestibular lasts 6, up to 6. If you allow your child to do too much vestibular activity, you're liable to have a meltdown some hours later. So while we're creating an environment that's sensory rich, attachment rich, we have to make sure it's not an overwhelming environment.
5, 6.
In this context, a child's needs for all the internal senses are met. Now, for some kids, they'll do 3 of them and be worn out, and we have to be respectful of that. That's good enough.
8, 9, 10. Woo! Good job. Now see if his body needs rest and water or he needs to do it again.
Some of the children will do maybe 10 rounds of the circuit, and then they will be a little wired. In that case, we know they need to do something calming that's deep muscle, proprioceptive. That would be like pushing down the wall. Interestingly, we all have self-calming techniques. Very often, we don't even identify what they are or recognize them. So for example, if you're very upset, you might put your hand over your mouth. And what you've done is you've pressed a pressure point. It's called a parasympathetic pressure point, and it's calming. Or some people who are very upset, you'll see them with hands over their face. Here again is pressure point, where we're calming ourselves. We didn't even realize it. There are also things that our children do intuitively. They've self-prescribed without even being aware. So we have children who have not a single shirt without a chewed up collar, where they just put the collar in their mouth and they chew it. I hear from mothers frequently, my child's pajamas, all have the dog-eared collars. Some of our children, if they have a necklace or if anything around their neck at all, they'll put it in their mouth. Some little girls you might see pull their hair and chew their hair. We might give them a sucker. If we're going to have a difficult conversation or we're going to talk about tough things, we may give them a wad of bubble gum. And the children, all they have to do is say, "May I please have a piece of bubble gum with respect?"
Can I have a piece of gum, please?
Oh yeah, that was great asking. Wow, I like the way you did that. Sure. Would you like to try it again and have another piece? And they can eat as much gum as they want, because that deep chewing causes them to be more and more calm. What we know is that we need to help that child be aware of their need and then give them 5 or 10 ways to meet that need.
Here, let's grab one side. We're gonna try to grab the parachute and spread it out. Grab the side and spread it out for me. This will help make our circle. You guys grab it? So, let's go ahead and start shaking it. Get your arms moving. Okay, we're gonna hold it all the way down. Hold it all the way down, let the air go down. And then we're gonna try to all together at the same time on the count of 3, we're gonna raise it up as high as we can and then try to bring it down. We're gonna try to go high as we can, up, and then bring it down. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3, up, high. Oh, down. 1, 2, 3, up. Down. Okay, wait for it, one more time. 1, 2, 3, up. Feel it in your body. Down. Okay, now, when I call your name, I'm gonna have you switch to the other side. I'm gonna call 2 people's names, and y'all switch sides. When the parachute is way up here, you switch sides and run under. Everybody got that? As soon as I call y'all's names, pay attention, because it's only going to be a small window. Watch that camera. I'm looking for my names here. Listen. Sonia and Jay. Go, Jay! You all right? All right. All right. Scott and Tiara. Thomas and Andrew. Okay. Ray and Noel. All right. Kiki and Ian. Get him. Mr. Mo and Jim. Jim. Oh, let's get Jim.
Those were just some examples, a few examples of sensory activities. In this session, we covered an introduction to empowering principles, physiological strategies, sensory processing challenges, and sensory preferences. Bye for now, and I'll see you in Module 6.